T.O. Blaze.
Hey there, this is T.O. bringing another Kerbal Space Program video. Back from another hiatus yet again. Been traveling and got a few more videos that I'd recorded a while back and still been meaning to put some audio over it. So this video was relatively fun. This was after one of the most recent updates, not the latest and last update, sad face, but the one before that, where they allowed you to do construction in EVA with engineers. So I'd been saving a couple crafts in orbit that I honestly didn't know if I would ever be able to use, and this update gave me the ability to use. There you see in screen the older model of the MK2 lander can. That's the model of the can before update 1.6. So if you're in the vehicle assembly building and you're going to use the lander can, it's not going to look like this. It's going to look like the newest version, which I just showed on screen. If you saw quickly. If you play the game, you're going to notice that's visually just not the same part. And I thought that was kind of interesting. I played after 1.6, so I didn't get to see that lander can and a few of the other skins that they've changed. But with this new update, where I can use that engineer that you see floating around in space, I'll be able to attach parts to this and create a rocket, or a lander in this case, and I'll get to use it. So this was one of the first times I've used the new EVA construction mode, and I definitely learned quite a lot. One thing I learned, hands down, the most helpful tip is put a grabbing unit on your mothership that's got all the parts, and just grab onto the item that you plan to do construction to, because all this bouncing back and forth is kind of ridiculous. So the parts that you attach to the new craft, or the other craft rather, it does change the part physics in real time. So if you move one little fuel tank from one craft to the other, it's going to move that amount of mass from one craft to the other, and it's going to cause the vehicles to move away from each other or to spin. So I have to keep going back and forth, back and forth. You can see I tried to design this so that I'd be able to use more than one engineer, which is the case. I've got 2 or 3 engineers on the mothership there on a ladder, and I've got one engineer on the actual the new ship, the new lander. So I'm yeah, I'm playing with it, as you can see, trying to figure out some of the parts are too heavy, some of them I choose not to attach. So in this case, I decided let me go with 4 of these radially attached fuel tanks, and that should give me the freedom to attach 2 or 4 engines. And when you're in orbit like this, you can actually move quite a lot of mass with these engineers. I think each additional engineer gives you the ability to move a little bit more. So I don't know the stats on it. If you wanted to look it up, you could calculate exactly how many engineers you need to move exactly how much mass. But in this case, I'm just kind of piddling with it, and I know I can move a Terrier engine, which is one of the I guess small engines, as opposed to these tiny engines on the side, these vernier engines. So I'm deciding just on the fly, I'll do 1 Terrier on the bottom for the vernier engines on the radial fuel tanks. Could have also done 2 or 4 spark engines on those fuel tanks. With this amount of mass, it probably would have done just fine. This is going to give me a couple of options. I mean, the Terrier engine is always going to be the most efficient when you're dealing with what I've brought along. So I probably could have just done the Terrier, but I also just wanted it to look cool. So I did notice also, once you've placed the part, then you can manipulate it. So I think I noticed it kind of late, but there you can see my crafts have drifted quite far from each other. So I'm having to boost back with the mothership to get closer to it. I've got nose cones, there you see. I've got smaller Oscar B tanks. I've got solar panels and batteries. All the things you would need for an actual proper landing vehicle. So there I've decided I don't need all these other engineers, so I'm just going to go ahead and move them in while the mothership's floating. You also can put structural components like those struts, those steel girders, but this case I'm just going to try to slap on as much mass as I can before it starts moving away. Oh, okay. And then let's float back. Also going to load up another engineer that I just had floating. I probably only need 1 engineer from here on, because all the rest of the parts that I need to move are small. So all the engineers are going to go back in the mothership, except maybe 1, and the mothership's got parachutes and it's going to deorbit itself. This is on my career mode, so these engineers do have experience. I don't know if the experience is a factor in how much mass they can move. I'm guessing not, but it could. And so yeah, that's one reason I guess I planned the mothership like I did so it can deorbit. Although even in sandbox mode, you wouldn't necessarily want to leave anything floating around with Kerbals in it. So this lander doesn't have an awful lot of Delta V, at least in my opinion. I'm just going to send it to the Mun. It probably could make it to Duna or some other places if I really calculated carefully. It's also got a docking port, so you could put a transfer stage on it, maybe an extra fuel tank or some liquid fuel and a nuclear engine or something like that. But in this case, I'm just going to send it to the Mun. We've got an orbital station around the Mun with some other Kerbals that I could always send down to the surface. But again, it's on career mode, so I send Kerbals down to plant flags to get experience all the time. That's like one of the last things that brings me joy in the career mode, is just seeing how many Kerbals I can level up all the way to 5 stars. And you need landers to do it. So there you see me again. Like I said, do yourself a favor, put a grabbing unit and just attach to the component that you want. There you see I'm just moving all the tiny components further to the front. Those are like the last ones that I'm guessing I'm planning to use. I've still got my one engineer on the actual lander, so I don't need any other engineers on the mothership. Let me grab the rest. There, boom, boom, boom. What else can I grab? Grab. And I can place it later. So floating away, just go ahead and place everything as best I can. Again, I didn't realize you could manipulate things after you've placed them, so I'm kind of just placing things as symmetrical as I can. And maybe a couple more components, a few more solar panels. Testing the legs. You'll see by the end of the video, the whole lander is not completely symmetrical, but it's the center of mass is still in the center of the craft, which is helpful. So, see what else I can grab. Couple batteries, maybe Oscar B tanks, just in case. So, yeah, batteries. There's really not much else I need. See, I had an extra Terrier engine just in case. I'd be curious to know what's like the largest engine with the max amount of engineers that you could actually manipulate. Because you think about it, you're in space, you've only got so much force you can lift and push with, so it makes sense that an engineer can only do so much, even in 0G. So I guess I'm going to get the legs all nice and situated. And I'm going to leave the mothership maybe. I don't remember the footage verbatim. Again, it's been some months. This was before the last update, like I mentioned, so had that footage recorded and thought it was worth showing. If you've got one of these old MK2 landers floating around in space somewhere, you can think about doing something like this. You get those parts, by the way, from doing rescue missions. So if you have a Kerbal stuck in space, the game just generates a craft. Usually it's always just one little part, and sometimes it's that Mark II lander can. So if you've never seen that style lander can before, do some rescue missions. You might get lucky. This lander can, I believe, yes, it was obviously in orbit around Kerbin. I had another one in orbit around Duna, which is not that far off, and I was going to do a mission to send all these parts to Duna, but once I got the one in orbit around Kerbin, I was like, yes, it's going to be much easier. So I guess I did decide to go with a few more Oscar B tanks, grabbed a couple sparks. So just parts, more and more parts. Trying to keep things symmetrical. So I'm liking it. Not bad for a craft made in orbit. And there you go, I'm just leaving some space debris. The lander's done. And it's got full fuel tanks, I believe. Which I'm curious if you emptied the fuel from the tanks, if it lowers the mass and wouldn't require as many engineers to manipulate. Also got some much needed RCS thrusters, as you just saw. No good lander doesn't have RCS, so you can dock with orbital stations and whatnot. And there's the mothership, leaving everything else in orbit. And gonna go ahead and land with the rest of my engineers. Got some parachutes on it. Pretty basic little return vehicle. And now all that's left is to test my lander. Send it to the Mun, see if I can land, and rendezvous maybe with the orbital station. Got my solar panels, yep, check. Got my landing legs. Now it's time to do my maneuver. But the new maneuver, the maneuver tool makes maneuver so much easier, but I still pretty much always eyeball the Mun just because it's so easy to get an encounter with. Basically want to burn prograde when the Mun is just over the horizon with Kerbin during your orbit. So if you can see the Mun, just point prograde and burn. And there's a little adjustment. I do want to come in the right attitude. There's the Mun, plenty of fuel, circularizing my orbit. There's my station, orbital station. So I guess I will go ahead and do a rendezvous first, and maybe grab some fuel and test the actual functioning of the lander. Try to put it on the surface of the Mun. I'll probably leave it there. I like to have one Kerbal on the surface of every celestial body, so that when you get a contract to plant a flag, you just find your Kerbal, handy dandy Kerbal, jump out, plant a flag, get some easy credits. So there's my station around the Mun. I think I had an older version and at some point updated this. That is it X-wing, Y-wing, or B-wing, whatever. That craft off to the left there is like one of my first landers and is obviously inspired by Star Wars. I was in the early days of my career mode and I left it up there just for old time's sake. Not a very efficient lander, but lots of fun to fly. Yep, I'm gonna go ahead and transfer some fuel. That's the only bad thing about using lots of smaller tanks is you gotta transfer fuel one tank at a time. I'm hoping in Kerbal 2 they overhaul the fuel transfer system. It'd be nice if I just said everything on this side of the docking port to this side of the docking port. Transfer as much as it can handle. But there we go. Getting in my first approach. Got my landing legs. As you can see from that top view, everything's not perfectly symmetrical, but it does the trick, right? This is my fancy first-person view landing. Coming in at less than 17 meters per second. You can see the altimeter cranking down. Once it gets closer to 0, you want to start throttling. A little too much throttle. Bouncing a little. Boop, touchdown. Nice. So that's it for the video. If you haven't tried messing around with the EVA Construction, I encourage you to do so. Definitely use some of the tips. Like I said, use a grabbing unit or something like that. I hope you got something out of the video. If you did, hit the like button, and I hope to see you again very soon. Thanks.